Oh la la. Okay. So, hello. Welcome to the next episode of the podcast Všímej, which we can translate into English, Be Mindful, for example, which will be firstly done in English because we have a great guest, Lost Heijke, a long-time mindfulness teacher. Lot is certified teacher of mindfulness and MBSR from Center for Mindfulness at the UMASS Medical School. She's also trained as a yoga teacher in the Netherlands and in the US and certified supervisor. Lot is the co-founder and former president of the European Mindfulness Network, EAMBA, and she's also lead teacher in the International Mindfulness Supervision Training Program, which I participate in the last year. Lot, welcome to the podcast. Great to having you here.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
How are
Very nice
you?
to be here. Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks. Great.
If you are okay with it, I'd like to start our talking with your beginnings. I'd like to ask you, how were your beginnings with mindfulness and meditations?
Hmm. Yeah, sure. My beginnings with mindfulness were quite at an early age. I think I was 6 when my mother discovered yoga and started to take lessons and to practice at home. And as a kid, I found all those funny poses very exciting to do. So I practiced along with her, and she would explain a little bit. And so that was, in a very light and playful way, my introduction. And then when I was about 13, we went on a meditation course as the whole
Wow.
family.
Wow.
In hindsight, yes. I think at that time it was not so normal. And yeah, I'm not sure if I realized that, but anyway, we went to the to the meditation course. And then as the family practiced for a long time, which was great. And my mom always knew that how much I improved, being in puberty. And she said, "Oh, you became so cheerful after all this meditation." So I can't remember that, but obviously, but she did. And so yeah, these were my first introductions, I think, to mindfulness, and
Mm,
then that was enough to for me to be curious to other
mm,
styles, and I've practiced Zen meditation for many years and gradually discovered Vipassana meditation, which is a style that is, as you know, close to mindfulness. And that's the style I currently practice. So that was sort of my way.
it sounds that like meditation, mindfulness has been like part of your life, almost like from your very very early
Yes.
beginning.
Yeah.
And
And I'm very grateful for the light way that I was introduced to it.
mm,
I mean, there was nothing very heavy or serious, and we would also joke about meditation during dinner sometimes, or yeah. And
mm,
I'm grateful that I could share this with my family, although not everyone continued to practice, obviously. But yeah, there's also a lot of practitioners who are the only ones in their family and cannot share anything about that. So
mm,
yeah, it's very
that
special.
that kind of leads me to a question: if someone is listening to us and has a like child or children, do you have any advice how to introduce meditation or mindfulness to kids? How to bring their like this lightness and joy and game rather than to be really like serious stuff.
Oh la la.
We have still an hour.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm an expert to teach to
Yeah.
kids. If you can experience some of the lightness in your own practice, you may be
Mm,
able to transfer that to kids, and like the wonder and the curiosity that is part of the practice, as far as I'm concerned. I think you could transfer that to kids because they are so open. It's their lifestyle, isn't it, to be
mm,
curious and wondering about how things go or what things look like. So to look at things, I think, and to pause and maybe notice the breath or do some movements. Yeah, I remember we did sort of games to follow the breath. Oh, I can't remember the details, but we did do some games that's
mm.
came automatically, I think, very naturally.
How did you see meditation, because it sounded to me that it was more like, for you, it was more like how to be curious about yourself and life. Have this kind of definition of mindfulness changed through your life? And how do you see what mindfulness is for you?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. It certainly has changed over the years. Yes, when I was first introduced to mindfulness or to meditation, it was more like a technique that I practiced.
Mm,
It was pleasant enough to continue with it, and
mm,
it has grown or broadened to, yeah, to include more aspects of my life. Also because
mm,
I studied a lot of Buddhist philosophy, which obviously is about the working of the mind. So yeah, it has become a bit wider than when I was 13. Yeah, that's for sure. And I think one of the things that I guess one of the things that brought me at first,
mm,
that the meditation brought me at first, was calm and more joy, more
mm,
connection to life. And that has been the theme throughout, more
mm,
joy,
mm,
but I think also more ease in life, and not taking myself so seriously anymore, not always at least. And yeah, seeing how life is changing all the time, how I'm changing, how the world is changing, and so
mm,
seeing that there's not a lot of control we have over
mm.
things, and that makes life lighter and easier. So more dimensions over time, I
I
think.
see. Was there like a moment when you started taking mindfulness like seriously? Yeah, okay, and now it's not a game, and now I'm practitioner.
Yeah. I mean, it is very serious. It's probably the most serious stuff that there is,
Mm,
to look at your life and to look at your the workings of your mind. So in that respect, it's very serious stuff. I think when I discovered John Kabat-Zinn's book, like for many of us, that was like a turning point. I was reading his book about the MBSR program that he developed, full catastrophe living, and I was so enthusiastic, and I felt like, oh, I could also learn this, so that I could pass it on to others. And before that, it had always been something personal in my own life, and now I feel like, maybe this is something to do professionally. And so then I took the teacher training with John, and went on to study, and I think then it got another flavor. Yeah, definitely more serious.
mm.
Yeah.
More serious practitioner.
But I can still laugh about it.
And so how was it when you meet like MBSR course? When we are speaking about MBSR, we mean like 8-week MBSR course. Did you do it in Netherlands or somewhere else? Or?
Yeah, at the time there were just one or two teachers, so it wasn't really hard to find one.
Mm,
And I did the 8-week course, and it was also quite a life changer, I must
mm,
say. And for me, what it has brought is that MBSR has a focus on the body, as you know. And that was a part of the meditation that was never highlighted so much in the
mm,
tradition that I practiced in. So it was very much a mind thing, meditation. And here John Kabat-Zinn comes and introduces the body as well as a reference point for awareness. And that made it so complete. And
mm.
yeah, that was really special, and it gave me much more awareness.
What have you learned about yourself thanks to mindfulness? And maybe one additional question,
Yeah.
like because we're speaking about mindfulness and meditation, maybe someone's could be confused if there are like synonyms, or if there is like a difference. If you can a little bit introduce if and how do you see like mindfulness and meditation and similarities, differences, and then we can jump to just what you want to share with us, what you have learned.
Yeah, what a great question, Michael. Yes, I realize I should have said more
Yeah.
about that, perhaps. So mindfulness could be the umbrella term for anything you practice to get more awareness. And there are different practices to do that. So one of the practices is meditation, and another practice is mindful movement or yoga, to the same words. There's also the body scan. That's a very famous practice in the mindfulness training. So mindfulness is really being aware in the moment and being present. And you can do that through different practice forms, really. And meditation is usually seen as the main practice in the mindfulness world. Yeah, and now to your
And
question.
then, my curiosity.
That's a difficult one.
Oh.
What did I not learn through mindfulness? Maybe
Okay.
because it's like a refinement over the years. I'm sure that is an experience that you recognize, that there's themes in our lives that we meet every time, and sometimes they're gone for a period of time, and then you think, oh, that's that old theme again.
Yeah.
And every time or over time they get different. I think there are many. One of the practices I did a lot was insight dialogue, which is a form of mindfulness meditation that you do with two people. So you reflect together in a very meditative way. And that has brought me a lot of insight about the way I communicate with people and the way I can bring mindfulness into my contacts. That doesn't mean I'm always mindful, obviously, but I see more of where my patterns kick in when I'm with someone. For instance, that I want to leave an excellent impression on someone, and I'm very busy, getting my point across. And when I notice that, I can relax and let go and remember that there is another human being sitting opposite of me, and then we can have a real connection. So that is very much about relationship, I would say. Also, themes like impatience or wanting things to be or to go exactly the way I want them to go. Yeah, so I think I am more relaxed in those areas. Though, I'm still impatient and I'm still frustrated at times. I think that is one of the biggest misunderstandings in mindfulness land, that once you start to meditate, you are never angry anymore, and you're always balanced and very zen, which is a joke for most of us. But it certainly helps to get out of that pattern of getting frustrated or getting upset, and seeing like, oh, okay, I was upset, and I can also go back to be in contact with the other.
That's for me, it's always like a nice challenge to kind of experience that even though we are still humans and still like kind of similar, as something is different.
Yeah, I think, all of us have our patterns and our shall I say, weak spots, the things that strike us in a communication. We want to be seen and heard, or we want to be acknowledged, or we think we're not good enough. That's a few of those, classical examples that lead to stress in human contact. And most of us, I mean, when we're over 18, we have practiced for over 18 years in reacting in a certain way. Like, if someone is starting to speak to you, especially partners or dear ones, you already feel the frustration coming up. And before you know it, you are being reactive. And mindfulness doesn't make that go away completely, I would say. Hopefully it does to some extent. but it can help you become aware of it quicker. So I had a particular friend, and whenever we were on the phone, we had a very, very interesting dynamic. Not when we talked live, but on the phone, somehow the two of us got easily irritated with each other. I don't know what the dynamic was there. And we both started to do mindfulness, and we noticed that the restlessness and the irritation, the friction came up, and then we could stop it for both of us. That was so beautiful to see. So it still came up, but we didn't need to spend the rest of our phone call being annoyed with each other or being upset. We could just take a breath and continue with the conversation in a different way. And that gives so much freedom and joy, that you don't need to be a slave of whatever emotion pops up for you, but you can make a choice. You have a choice. Yeah.
That leads me also to question, because I already introduced you as a certified MBSR teacher. You're teaching for many years, and I'm like a little bit go like to your beginnings and ask you what was the reason you decided to become a teacher, and how were your beginnings as a teacher?
Yeah. Yeah, as I said, I was really, really taken by John's book about the 8-week mindfulness training program. And I was so inspired that I went to the US. At that time, there was no teacher training here, as far as I remember. And I wanted to learn it with him. So I did the teacher training with his center. And when I got back, I was so enthusiastic. I started teaching, and I think only after a couple of trainings, I realized the impact that the course can have on people. So I started quite naively and very joyfully teaching the program, and then it only hit me after a few trainings, like, wow, this is really powerful stuff. And so I was really happy to be trained in a lovely place where you were trained as well. I mean, so much quality there. And so I felt safe enough or secure enough to hold the courses that I was teaching. But I didn't realize the impact until after a while. And I've loved it ever since. And I don't know if that is also your experience, but every training I give, I think, this is absolutely the loveliest group I've ever had. And I tell the group, but I always say, I tell every group the same. And I really do. I love being with people and see how the practice is changing things in their lives and how it is beneficial for them. Is that something you recognize?
Definitely, that is so funny. Usually, like at the first or second session when I came home, I say to my wife, "Oh, what a wonderful group! I never had that awesome group. I'm so excited with them." And
it's never boring, is it? Because
no,
it touches people, and then it touches me, of course, being there with them and recognizing a lot of stuff that is happening. Yeah.
For me, it's still like privilege to teach it and be part of it. And I like to ask you, like, how do you see like you as a teacher like changing in years? What have you learned from this years as a teacher, and of course as a person?
I've definitely changed, but how to put that into words? I think I've become more relaxed, and at the same time, I've become more precise in my teaching because of all my own practice. And every time you sit on your cushion meditating, you see it just a little bit more, and you understand just a little bit more. So I think over the years, I've understood more and more, also because I started to teach others to become a mindfulness teacher, which gives another layer of understanding. So yeah, I think that has made me more precise in how I bring themes or how I work with people.
And do you see how is mindfulness perceived in Netherlands when you started as a teacher and now?
Oh, definitely. When I started, it was often frowned upon, especially by the mental health people, also by the real Buddhists, so to speak.
Really?
which I think is the case in most countries where mindfulness was introduced. Like for Buddhists, mindfulness was something like Buddhism light, and it was not serious enough. And for mental health professionals, it was some kind of relaxation course that people didn't understand. And but I think because MBSR, the classical mindfulness program, has been researched so thoroughly over the past 40 years and also worldwide, it has gotten respect, and it has been able to land also in the like in the academic world. So that is why it has been taken seriously after a while. And in Holland, I think everyone knows about mindfulness. When I'm now at a party and someone asks me like, so what is it that you do? And I say, well, I work with mindfulness. And say, oh yeah, I've done a course or I've done a workshop.
Oh.
I've heard or my neighbor has done it. But there's some notion of, oh yeah, mindfulness. So that has changed.
That's interesting because I have like a little bit similar but different experience, because when
Yeah.
I say to someone what I'm doing and say, yeah, I teach mindfulness, I know mindfulness, but actually, what is it mindfulness? So this is like the most common experience. People know the word mindfulness and they somewhere read it,
Yeah.
but in general, they don't really know what is behind, or they have very not clear idea what is it. Is it the same in Netherlands or is it like different?
Well, I think because it has been embraced by the mental health institutes, so many people have done a training now that a lot of people actually know what it is like. Even my hairdresser the other day said, yeah, unfortunately, I am familiar with mindfulness because I had a burnout. And I think like, oh, so that was not a very positive experience.
Unfortunately, I know what
Yeah,
mindfulness
unfortunately.
is. That's lovely.
I think he was more embarrassed about the fact that he had gotten
Mm,
a burnout than that he had done
mm. But when I went to Worcester, where I studied mindfulness, when I came there, I thought that everyone knows mindfulness. So I lived as an Airbnb, and the landlord asked me what I'm doing here. I was like, I'm gonna study mindfulness. I was like, what is it? And I
myself.
was so I was so surprised, because this is like the center of centered mindfulness,
Yeah,
and people didn't know it so much about mindfulness in Brussels. So it's like it was funny.
yeah. Worcester, the sacred place. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
You mentioned also Buddhism, and that's one of the things I like to a little bit touch, because if you are speaking about mindfulness, we can also say that this is kind of method was like created by John Kabat-Zinn in 1979 or in the 80s. But there are also some critical views on it, saying that this is so reductive. Like, what do you think of it? Also, after all these years of teaching mindfulness, and even though, as we already spoke about it, that we have many good experiences with our participants.
I'm happy to answer, but I'm very curious about your view. Is that okay?
Actually, one of the thoughts what comes to my mind is how not to kind of do misunderstanding of mindfulness, because as I said, this is like a buzzword that everyone know the word mindfulness, but really don't know what is behind. I feel like I don't want to do it like to Buddhism, misuse something they have created for years. But one last thing I want to add, when you were speaking, and also when you mentioned like this UMASS Medical School, a lot of memories comes to my mind, like, oh, what a wonderful place was, and what wonderful people and teachers were there.
Yeah.
And there were like no doubts that we are doing good things.
Yeah, that was one of the most inspirational places. I agree.
Mhm.
Yeah. I also agree to what you say that there is a value in knowing what you can teach and what you can't teach. And I think nowadays in most teacher trainings there is at least a little part about the Buddhist philosophy, so that you know the background, as well as the mindfulness training is of course about how to deal with our stress and our suffering. But obviously the Buddhist philosophy is a bit more extensive than an 8-week training. I can't stop being so amazed about the intelligence of the curriculum and what is happening, to see what is happening to people in just 8 weeks. And they pick up the themes that are really detailedly described in Buddhism. And I'm not interested in naming it Buddhism or talking about Buddhism, but Buddhism talks about universal human themes. And I think that's what we do in MBSR. And I've had people in my courses from different backgrounds, different cultures, but also different religions. And so I think it is very clever and very useful to have it as a secular program so that many people can profit. And yeah, as I said, I'm not interested what stamp is on it, a Buddhist or secular, but the fact that it is so accessible is such a beautiful aspect, I think, of the training. If it's not religious, if it is really open and neutral, then it can serve more people, I think.
So what should be done to not to misuse the mindfulness and to teach it in a good way? Of course, there's like a
Okay.
teacher training, supervision.
So this is something that we have talked about in the European network of mindfulness associations that we founded years ago, and also there's a quality network where we talk about those things because so many people are touched by mindfulness that they go out in the world, as you know, and start to teach the program themselves. I think it is the role of each country's mindfulness association to do good PR so that people realize that it is important to go to a teacher who has been trained, who has experience, because you're going to look at your own stress and about your own patterns. And sometimes it is very joyful, but sometimes, you can come across things that are not so nice. So as a teacher, you should be able to hold all of that. And that means that you should have looked into your own craziness and your own stress and patterns. And so, yeah, that is our hope, of course, that everywhere people are willing to invest in their own professional training and do retreats so that they can serve their groups better.
And you also mentioned that one of the common misunderstanding is that be mindful means like not having problem and be just happy and not experience some difficult emotions.
Yeah.
And what a surprise for people then they realize that kind of be mindful is be more close to emotions. What other most common misunderstandings of mindfulness do you see?
Well, I always like to stress that I'm a human being. Starting from the first session, that I also have thoughts when I meditate. People, somehow there's all over the world, I think there's this common belief that when you meditate, your head is empty, you never have any thoughts, you never have one bad emotion. It's, as you said, it's always, you're always happy. And I always tell people like, oh, I also have thoughts and I'm also stressed at times. So it's not about that, but and it's a bit unrealistic to expect that in the way we live, our very high-strung lives, being on social media all the time. It's not realistic to expect that we are zen and very balanced all the time. This is more a very helpful method to help you not being swept away, not to disappear completely into whatever is happening to you. So not have the anger take over or the fear take over or the frustration take over, but to feel that it is coming up and to work with it. But also in the teacher training, many teachers are embarrassed when they share that they still have thoughts in a meditation or that they have likes and dislikes in their lives. And that, I think, that is coming back to one of your previous questions. Maybe what mindfulness has taught me is to be more human over the years, not to have to answer to all the images, to be perfect in this or that, but to be more human with all my mistakes and all the things that are happening to me that are maybe not the way I want them to be, but yeah, to be more human and to have more kindness in my life. That gives freedom.
It reminds me, I also to my students say that this is very normal to have thoughts. And after some maybe 6 or 7 sessions, one student says, "Yeah, but you, Michael, you don't have thoughts, right?"
Yeah.
So,
And
and
what
it
do you
was
say?
it's like, yeah, well, even though I'm saying I really have thoughts, and but it's also like interesting in my experience how kind of sometimes it's difficult to be a human, especially how many expectations we have on ourselves.
Yeah.
And that was my actually experience when I became teacher. I think, oh, and now I have to be perfect because I have to present perfectly mindfulness. So this, yeah, this is something I like in mindfulness. It's like a never-ending development, a never-ending like realization. Oh, I have to go back. I have to go back to be a human.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and ultimately, I think this work is about having more freedom in our lives, being
Mm.
more clear, but also having more freedom, and to be able to be just a human being gives so much freedom, less stress.
Yeah, that's so interesting because we ended up with the words that are so related to mindfulness, kind of relief and stress, but the way how to get them is a little bit different because some people think to be less stressed means to suppress something, but basically mindfulness teaches something so different, like to open it, like
Yeah.
to open to things and then get the relief. Yeah.
Yeah, what the word that came up to me is it is a very intimate practice because you get to know yourself much more, and you can allow yourself to be imperfect or to be there with everything, with all your qualities and all your difficulties, and yeah, just be human and have
Yeah.
compassion for that, and that gives a sort of an intimate relationship with yourself that is
Yeah.
very relaxing, I think.
You mentioned that you co-created the European Mindfulness Network called EAMBA. I don't know how to how to pronounce it properly. And
EAMBA, I think, yeah.
I'd like to ask you, what was the reason behind you co-create it and what?
So in 2010, I believe, around that time, we were sitting in a bar after a conference with a couple of colleagues from different countries, how the situation was with
Mm,
mindfulness in our respective countries. And it was so interesting to hear that some of the things, we were struggling with in Holland were exactly the same in Switzerland, and but they would have different questions, and so then I said, well, we should get together, and which was what we did. And we started to get together every year, first with a small group, and then later on the group grew. So I think currently there's about 23 European countries that join, and some countries have big associations, some have small associations, some associations are just a handful of people, and some are really big, like over 1,000 teachers that are part of the association. And the aim was really to exchange and to support each other. And I remember in the first years we spent a lot of time to try and find out if we could um, make arrangements so that in all countries people could have some benefits from health insurance, but that was too complex.
mm,
We couldn't arrange that. But that was one of the ideas, to see if we could organize things together so that we
mm,
wouldn't have
mm,
to reinvent the wheel. And so we did talk a lot about teacher training and quality of training. And so, as you probably are aware, in the COVID times, there were regular meetings for people to get together on Zoom and talk about topics concerning mindfulness, but also concerning teaching, how to teach a group or certain aspects of teaching. And we also decided to offer retreats just for mindfulness
mm,
teachers every year, which is lovely because a real European community or Sangha has been created. So
mm.
it's partly a group that comes back every year for that retreat. It's just lovely to practice with people from the same profession and to exchange afterwards. And we also organize a summer festival. So it's like a conference, not a scientific conference, but more with issues that are alive in mindfulness teaching. Yeah, it has grown, the network, and I've stepped back because after a while it's good to have new people, new fresh new blood. And before I became a fossil, I wanted to to leave, give other people some space.
Get fossil.
The mindfulness fossil.
What were like maybe the biggest obstacles you as an organization had to get over or find out?
I think for some of us that had organizations in our own countries for a number of years and who, were growing quite quickly, as we wanted to go faster than others who were just about to begin or who had as a main challenge, how do I get mindfulness, introduced in my country, because people are very suspicious in a number of countries. It was quite hard to introduce mindfulness at first because people thought this was a new religion or it would clash with their own religion. So there were different interests, I think, especially in the first years, in how fast we would go and which themes were relevant. And of course, there's also cultural differences in how you communicate with each other. Some countries are more out, or some cultures maybe are more outspoken, others are more quiet, and how to get all the voices out there in the circle. And so we spent a lot of time also socializing, but also exchanging, and some real deep friendships have developed over the years. So for me personally, it has been a very beautiful experience to meet so many different people in Europe and to hear how mindfulness developed over time.
Can you say what's like the biggest differences in a way countries see mindfulness?
Once was teaching in a country and and people said, well, Lot, this body scan, we keep falling asleep. We think it doesn't agree with our, with the nature of our people. And I said, well, I'm not sure, because people keep falling asleep during the body scan in all countries around
Everywhere.
the world.
Was it Italy?
And no, it was Turkey.
No. Okay, then.
Yeah, and they said, well, we have such a Mediterranean character, so maybe the body scan is not suitable for us. And I said, oh, that's such a lovely thought. But in Holland, people think for different reasons that the body scan is not suitable. and another thing I think is how mindfulness was perceived in different countries. In some countries, it started in the academic world, and universities were the big driving forces. And so mindfulness got accepted more widely, more quickly. And in other countries where maybe there was more religion dominant, there was more of a hesitation, like, what's this? Can we trust it, or is it a sect? Of course. How was that for you in the Czech Republic when you started? Because you've been around for a while as well.
Well, in Czech Republic, most of the people are very against to anything which is like religion. So that's a good thing of mindfulness, because mindfulness is a secular way. So sometimes what happens to me that someone calls me and asks me if it's really true, and if it's not like some religion thing, or in Czech we say EZO. And I think it's in the it's like hoo. It's like who. It's something like it's like a new age stuff. It's like something like that.
Yeah.
It's like no, it's not like that. So people are a little bit like suspicious if it's okay, and that's one of the reasons why I think mindfulness works well also in the Czech Republic, because people see that there's no like something behind what we want to really push them.
Very good to be critical about movements like this that affect the mind, and to keep your mind open, and to not just accept everything and just go along. I do remember years ago I worked in training organization that was providing training for doctors. And when I shared, in a coffee break that I was also teaching mindfulness on the side next to this job, they would look at me and have this funny look like, "Oh, you poor woman, are you one of those?" But it was a good thing that I hadn't dyed my hair red and I wasn't wearing a purple dress. I didn't look very exotic. I think I looked fairly normal. So, okay, I wasn't too bad. And then that changed very quickly. In a very short time, the doctors would say like, "Oh, mindfulness. Yes, I have just referred a patient to one of those courses." And then a few years later, they said, "Oh, mindfulness. Yes, I have done the course myself." And to see that development, that it has landed in such a broad way throughout society, I think that's a very good thing.
That leads me like one of the last questions, and this is the future of mindfulness. And sometimes when I speak with some of my colleagues, especially from the west part of Europe, or also from the US, and they say that they notice that like the interest of mindfulness is decreasing. And I wonder if you see it like similarly or not, and if so, what do you see? What is like behind of it, or what are the reasons why you think that the interest is decreasing?
That's a difficult question. Yeah, I certainly see the same movement happening, and I hear that from international colleagues as well. And I think it's a development that started in or after Corona. And there's this sense that people somehow don't like to commit to longer programs or find it difficult to commit to something. And then 8 weeks for many people is a very long period. So yeah, I see a lot of shorter periods, shorter trainings being developed, being offered. And what I also see is that there's a lot of adapted programs. So yeah, I mentioned mental health. Of course, that was the first field where a new program was developed specifically for people with depression, the MBCT. But in many different professional fields, there are now specific mindfulness-based programs. And usually there are just a couple of weeks or a bit shorter, mindfulness communication, mindful eating. So I think it is more integrated in different parts of society. Different formats are being developed. I think it's going that way. But I can't look into the future. I couldn't give you an exact answer there.
That would have been like my another question. Where do you see the future of mindfulness actually, or where do you want to see the future of mindfulness?
Well, I think given the amount of anxiety that is around, coming back to the hairdresser, we had a conversation the other day, and the hairdresser was just talking about how stressed he was and how much depression he experienced. He was just sharing that with me, and so many people are overwhelmed. And so on one hand, there's this, the fear to commit to a longer program, but on the other hand, there's such a need for more balance and more peace and quiet.
That still like really interested me, that there's like a method, like, as mindfulness is, and there's a lot of like anxiety and stress, but we don't do it, which is like, so I mean, it's still so interesting how sometimes it's difficult to find time for something which is really helpful for us, rather than, I don't know, scrolling cell phones and anything, even though I know that they are more addictive and everything.
Yeah, such a contradiction, isn't it? We
It
know
is.
that the other stuff is good for us, but we don't do it, or we don't get there because we're so addicted to what is in front of our nose. Yeah.
As we are going to the end, I'd like to give you a space to introduce to the listeners, what are you doing, what courses you are doing and where they can meet you, what courses or retreats or they can do with you. Yeah.
Okay, so yes, I certainly have a website that has my name and my name in it. And I teach in a lot of teacher training programs in different countries, in Germany a lot, in Belgium, in Turkey, other places. So that's where people can meet me. I was also teaching in the Czech Republic a while ago, as you know.
Mm.
I've taught a number of retreats there as well, which I just loved. The connection with the Czech Republic has been such a lovely one. It was such a discovery. We happened to start there, and getting to know your country a little bit and to know at least the sounds of the language. Has been very special. Has been like a gift. So teaching retreats, I do a lot, and something I was also referring to that something I've loved doing over the past years is to teach courses in what is called interpersonal mindfulness. So courses that focus on mindfulness in communication, mindfulness in human contacts. What makes that we can connect, and how do we lose connection?
Mm.
And last but not least, I also teach a supervision course, the one you mentioned in the beginning, and the one you were visiting as well as a participant. And that is also a joy to teach people how they can support others in supervising, coaching other professionals. And so my work is all about being present and developing more clarity in whatever way, whether it is in a retreat or in a MBSR course or teacher training or supervision. It's all about getting more clarity in your life. And I look forward to meeting more people, especially from the Czech Republic. The contact has been
Absolutely.
very, very dear, very special.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was lovely to be with you, and also it was lovely to hear what all things you're doing. And I'd like to thank you for all these things you are contributing. So thank you for your time and time you dedicated to mindfulness and you give it also to this podcast.
Hmm. Well, thank you for inviting me and for having me. And it's been a joy meeting you over the years,
Mm.
because our contact goes back quite a number of years, and to meet you today. So it was lovely to exchange about mindfulness. Yeah, so thank you.